Breaking news out of Rome today. The Pope has had enough. Basta così. And let me tell you something. If you've pissed off Francis, you have really stepped over the line, and that is not advisable. But the Pope absolutely admonished both Trump and so-called practicing Catholic J.D. Vance, who understands Catholic social teaching about as much as the average fruit fly. So today, the Pope called out both Trump and Vance in the most clever way possible by writing a letter to all the U.S. Catholic bishops and by not mentioning Trump or Vance's name, even though their name is all over the document. First clue that Papa Francesco is talking about Trump and Vance is the fact that the purpose of the letter is to denounce mass deportation, even though the U.S. Catholic bishops have already condemned Trump's mass deportation plans. And the Pope has good cause to call out JD, because when it comes to saying idiotic things about the Catholic Church, there's no one quite at that level as the wannabe hillbilly. Listen to this.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
Well, let me address this. Of course, if you have a person who is convicted of a violent crime, whether they're an illegal immigrant or a non-illegal immigrant, you have to go and get that person to protect the public safety. That's not unique to immigration. But let me just address this particular issue, Margaret, because as a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line?
So here we go with the same old lie. Hardened criminals. As of today, the majority of people being arrested and deported by ICE are not criminals. So that's just Vance lying. But how about his inane criticism? The church's bottom line? Newsflash, J.D. Vance, the Catholic Church is a nonprofit. Know what that means? It means when you give the Catholic Church specifically $1 million to serve meals to the homeless, do you know what happens to that money? It feeds homeless people. They don't stop spending on feeding people until the money runs out. What do you think they do? Skim 30% for administrative costs and pocket the money? Vance may call himself a Catholic, but he knows nothing about the Catholic Church. He also knows nothing about Catholic social teaching or Christian theology. Listen to him proving his vast ignorance on Christian theology.
You love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world.
Prioritizing who you love in hierarchical distinctions? This guy just profoundly misinterpreted a fundamental tenet of Christianity. Love thy neighbor. In fact, Vance has it 180 degrees wrong. So wrong that the only reasonable way to describe what he's talking about is anti-Christian theology. It did not go unnoticed by the Pope, who slammed him. But first, the Pope attacked Trump and his moronic mass deportation plans, stating, "I have followed closely the major crisis that is taking place in the United States with the initiation of a program of mass deportations. The act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families, and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness." Translation: you are a cold-hearted jerk who can't even remotely bring himself to empathize with people, especially vulnerable people. And the Pope backs that up by addressing Christians who are going along with this, reminding them, "The true common good is promoted when society and government, with creativity and strict respect for the rights of all, welcomes, protects, promotes, and integrates the most fragile, unprotected, and vulnerable." Translation: if you want to consider yourself Christian, then start having mercy, empathy, and care for the vulnerable. And then the Pope takes Vance to the proverbial woodshed. He writes, Christians know very well that it is only by affirming the infinite dignity of all that our own identity as persons and as communities reaches its maturity. Translation, look, Vance, I know you're a convert and all, so let me spell this out for you. You haven't even remotely grasped what it means to be Christian. But he goes on with the specific theological takedown of Vance. Christian love is not a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups. Translation, you know that thing you said on television, the hierarchy of love and concern? Yeah, well, you're dead wrong. And then he continues. In other words, the human person is not a mere individual, relatively expansive, with some philanthropic feelings. The human person is a subject with dignity who, through the constitutive relationship with all, especially with the poorest, can gradually mature in his identity and vocation. Oh, ouch, that's just third-degree burn stuff. It translates to, if you weren't such an elitist a-hole, if you actually had contact with the poor, you wouldn't be such a jerk, and you might actually learn what Christian love really means. And ending with the immaturity thing again. Vance, you have been schooled. But having run over Vance with his white Fiat Cinquecento, the Pope, of all people, throws it in reverse and backs over him again. I keep telling you people not to mess with gli Italiani, but you don't listen. So here's how the Pope concludes. The true ordo amoris that must be promoted is that which we discover by meditating constantly on the parable of the Good Samaritan. That is, by meditating on the love that builds a fraternity open to all without exception. Translation, dude, even third graders understand the Good Samaritan means love the stranger, but you don't, so go back and study it. And then the Pope gives a reminder to all. Christianity means you love everyone, without exception. Yeah, that's the part everybody runs away from, but none faster than J.D. Vance. Unless, of course, it's Donald Trump, the person who is completely and unapologetically incapable of love. And yet, people who think themselves Christians admire him. The Pope's letter may have been addressed to the bishops, but they were the last people that he was really talking to. I'm Anthony Vincent Gallo for Occupy Democrats.